Deep beneath the mountain, a lone dwarf strikes his chisel against stone. Master builder Kalen works in absolute focus, carving the final runes into his life's work, the Arch of Echoes. He believes dwarven craft should create places of profound peace, not just impenetrable fortresses. This arch is his argument, his legacy, designed to harmonize the mountain's own deep resonance. But a younger generation values glittering gems over quiet beauty, and Kalen fears his philosophy will be forgotten with him. A subtle wrongness thrums through the stone, a discordant note in the mountain's song that he has been ignoring to finish his project. By the end of this tale, you will discover how a single crack in his perfect arch unveils a secret that saves an entire civilization. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? The deep hum of the mountain holds a promise, a revelation that Kalen's next strike is about to unlock. What does it truly mean to build something that lasts? A sound like shattering crystal, impossibly high and sharp, cuts through the deep mountain hum. It is the sound of Kalen's world breaking, a hairline fracture, invisible to his eyes but screaming to his senses, spider webs across the face of the Arch of Echoes. In that same moment, the mountain's foundational resonance, the steady song he has built his life upon, stutters into a discordant, pained groan. His tools fall from his hands, clattering on the stone floor as he lunges forward, pressing his ear and his calloused palms flat against the cold stone of the arch. Every instinct honed over decades screams that this is wrong. This is not the natural settling of rock. This is a wound. His perfect harmony is broken. The Arch of Echoes, his life's argument for peace and resonance, stands as a monument not to his success, but to a catastrophic failure. The doubt he feared from the younger generation now echoes within his own mind, shaking the very core of his identity as a master builder. His pride in the finished work wars with a chilling, undeniable truth. The mountain itself is in distress, and his construction, intended to soothe, may have somehow aggravated a deep, unseen injury in the stone. He cannot ignore it. He will not call for the clan, not yet. To raise an alarm would be to admit his legacy is flawed and risk a panic that could fracture their society faster than any crack in the rock. This is his responsibility, a problem born of his methods, and his expertise alone must find the source. The personal stakes of his legacy are now inextricably tied to the literal stability of the Dwarven halls. His life's work is not merely a failed piece of art, it is a potential key to a far greater danger lurking in the deep places. With a determined grunt, Kalen turns from the flawed arch. He gathers his geode lantern, its inner crystals pulsing with a soft, captured light, and his trusted mapping kit. Without a backward glance, he steps away from the grand halls and into the deeper, uncharted tunnels, the very ones from which that pained groan seemed to originate. The tunnel walls pressed in close, their rough-hewn surface scraping against Kalen's heavy leather apron. This was not a path for grand processions, but a forgotten service corridor, narrow and choked with the dust of centuries. With each cautious step, he raised his hammer and tapped a steady, patient rhythm against the stone. The clear, ringing replies were the mountain's own language, a song of density and stability taught to him by his old master. He listened not just with his ears, but with the bones of his hands, feeling for the truth hidden within the rock. For a long while, the echoes answered true, a familiar and reassuring chorus. Then his next tap was met not with a bright chime, but with a soft, hollow thud. The sound was wrong. He tapped again and again, mapping the edges of the silence. A section of wall, no larger than a dwarven shield, gave back a dull and muted echo, a void where solid rock should have been. This was no natural cave formation. The stonework here was perfect, seamless to the eye, but it masked an emptiness behind it. The instability was not the mountain's failure, but their own. A flaw in the ancient craft, a secret buried by the very builders who had laid these foundations. The physical strain of the cramped passage was nothing compared to the weight of this realization. His ancestors, the legendary architects of these halls, had perhaps built a lie into the heart of their home. His hand trembled as he selected his smallest, sharpest chisel. To break this wall was to violate a sacred trust, to question the infallibility of those who came before. Yet, to leave it unexamined was to let the unknown fracture threaten everything. Knowledge and the chance for repair had to come before blind preservation. He placed the chisel's tip at the edge of a single, critical keystone and began to work it loose with painstaking care. The stone gave way with a soft grating sound, and a wave of air, stale and thick, with the scent of ancient metal and undisturbed age, washed over him. He lifted his geode lantern, its pulsing light spilling into the darkness, and his breath caught in his throat. The chamber revealed was not a natural cavern. Its walls were sheer and impossibly smooth, meeting at angles that defied the logic of dwarven engineering. It was a space that, by all the laws of his people, should not exist. The air in the chamber was still and cool, tasting of old brass and stone dust. Kalen squeezed through the narrow opening, his geode lantern casting long, dancing shadows across a workshop lost to the ages. It was a circular vault, a master builder's secret sanctuary. All around him, frozen in mid-gesture, stood clockwork figures of intricate brass and obsidian, their delicate gears silent. Scattered across stone tables were architectural models of breathtaking complexity, depicting the mountain's deepest root structures with a radical understanding he had never seen. These were not designs for grand halls or treasure vaults. They were blueprints for survival, schematics for reinforcing the very heart of the mountain against unimaginable pressure and seismic shifts. A wave of profound awe washed over him, followed by a chill of dread. This was a lost chapter of dwarven history, a cache of advanced knowledge his people had forgotten. The crack in his arch was not a sign of his failure, but a symptom of a much older, greater problem that these forgotten builders had tried to solve. The fate of the entire mountain, not just his legacy, now rested on his ability to understand their work. He moved to the largest model, a sprawling representation of the mountain's core that glimmered under his light. He traced the delicate brass filigree that depicted structural harmonics and stress dispersion networks, committing every impossible angle and reinforcing trust to memory. This was the answer, but could one old dwarf, working alone, apply this forgotten science in time to prevent a total collapse? The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a mountain of its own. Then, from a dark corner of the workshop, a sound broke the profound silence. It was the dry, grating scrape of metal on metal. One of the ancient automata, its obsidian eyes catching the light, twitched as a long-stilled gear within its chest began to turn. The automaton uncurled with a series of soft, metallic clicks, its granite-carved body settling into a low, blocking stance. Its crystal eyes, now lit with an amber glow, fixed on Kalen. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was no mindless machine, but a warden, a guardian of the old ways. He held his ground, raising the geode lantern high to illuminate his tools, a chisel and a mapping hammer, not a warrior's axe. His mind raced, sifting through half-remembered lessons from his youth, protocols for dealing with the sentinels of deep places. Combat was unthinkable. Its design was for crushing rock and intruders alike. The only path was proof, a demonstration of purpose. Slowly, never breaking eye contact with the gleaming crystals, Kalen knelt. He brushed a patch of ancient dust, clear on the stone floor with his palm. With a single, deliberate finger, he etched the symbol of his station, the interlocking hammer and compass that declared him a master builder. It was a plea and a declaration, an appeal to a shared legacy. For a long, breathless moment, the warden remained motionless, its amber gaze locked on the sigil. Then, the light in its eyes shifted, cooling from a warning amber to a calm, accepting blue. It uncoiled its badger-like form and stepped aside with a graceful, silent pivot. One clawed foot gestured toward the far wall, where a massive, seamless stone door began to grind inward, revealing a dark, descending staircase that breathed out air even older and stiller than the workshop. The way was open, but deeper into the unknown. The staircase spiraled down into a profound silence that seemed to swallow the very sound of his breathing. At its base, the darkness gave way to a soft, rhythmic glow, and Kalen stepped into a cavern so vast his geode lantern could not hope to illuminate its ceiling. In the center of this immense space stood the source of the light and the source of the mountain's pain. It was the Heartstone, a crystal of impossible size, pulsing with a deep, resonant energy that should have felt like the steady heartbeat of the world. But its light was sickly, a dimming amber, and across its surface crawled a network of black, vein-like cracks that throbbed with a discordant, painful rhythm. This was not a chamber built by Dwarven hands. This was the mountain's sacred core, and it was dying. He approached slowly, his boots whispering on the smooth stone floor, and reached out, placing both palms flat against the crystal's warm surface. A jolt of raw, erratic vibration shot up his arms, a sensation of fever and fracture that made him gasp. The structural flaws in the halls above, the crack in his own arch, they were all just echoes. This was the root of the sickness, a foundational illness in the very soul of the mountain. His dwarf's nature, his deep, innate connection to the stone, recoiled from this decay. It was a violation of every natural law he knew, a conflict between what should be eternal solidity and the terrifying reality of its slow, silent shattering. In that moment, any thought of his personal legacy, of the Arch of Echoes, crumbled to dust. It was irrelevant. His entire life, all his years of training and craft, had been a preparation for this single task. The hidden workshop, the radical models, they were not mere curiosities. They were a desperate blueprint left by the ancients, a guide for this exact moment. He had to heal the Heartstone, There was no other choice. The survival of every hall, every forge, every single dwarf who called this mountain home now depended on his ability to understand and apply a forgotten art. The volatile energy radiating from the damaged crystal was a physical danger, a constant threat that the mountain's very heart might give way. He remembered a specific component from the largest model, a lattice of interlocking silver filaments designed to cradle and stabilize a core structure. That was the answer. He turned to retrieve it, his mind already racing through the construction, but a low, deep rumble shook the chamber. The floor trembled, and a shower of dust and pebbles rained down from the unseen ceiling high above. The silence of the deep places shattered against the clamor of the main thoroughfare. Kalen strode through the bustling heart of the Dwarven halls, his face set in grim lines that parted the crowds more effectively than any shouted command. He did not go to his workshop or his flawed arch. He went directly to the Chamber of Echoes, where the Elder Council held court. The guards at the great bronze doors, seeing the dust of forgotten tunnels on his clothes and the urgent fire in his eyes, stepped aside without a word. He crossed the threshold, his heavy boots echoing in the solemn hall, and stood before the semicircle of stone seats, where the clan's most venerable leaders regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and deep concern. Elder Boren, his long white beard braided with rings of office, spoke first, his voice a low rumble. "Master Builder Kalen, you interrupt a council of provisioning. Speak your mind." Kalen placed his hands flat on the smooth obsidian table that separated them. He did not speak of his arch or his pride. He spoke of a sickness in the stone, a fracture in the mountain's heart. He produced a piece of chalk from his pouch, and with swift, sure strokes, began to draw on the dark surface. He sketched the immense Ailing Heartstone, its surface webbed with cracks that pulsed with discordant energy. Then, beside it, he rendered the impossible angles and reinforcing lattices from the hidden workshop, the forgotten science of the ancients. A wave of disbelieving murmurs rippled through the council. One elder, a stern forge mistress named Drifa, scoffed. "You ask us to believe the mountain itself is dying, based on chalk lines and the word of one builder who has spent too long in the deep dark. To act on this would cause a panic that could shatter our people faster than any crack in a crystal." Kalen met her gaze, his own unwavering. He knew this moment would define more than just his legacy. It would define their future. "I stake my name, my title, and my every achievement on this truth," he declared, his voice ringing with a conviction that silenced the room. "The Arch of Echoes was my argument for beauty. Let this be my argument for survival. Grant me the artisans and the resources, and I will lead the repair. I accept full responsibility for the outcome." The political stakes now hung in the air, as tangible as the mountain around them. To follow him was to risk their entire social order on a radical, terrifying endeavor. To deny him was to risk a far more final collapse. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, Elder Boren leaned forward, his aged eyes studying the chalk drawings, as if seeing the ghost of his own ancestors. He looked at Kalen, seeing not a solitary artisan, but a dwarf willing to bear the weight of the world. He gave a single, grave nod. "You will have your team, Master Builder. Every smith, carver, and apprentice who can hold a tool. The Grand Forge is yours. Do not let the mountain fall." The Grand Forge roared to life, a cavernous space where the very air shimmered with heat and urgency. Kalen climbed onto a massive anvil, the gathered sea of dwarven faces looking up at him, their expressions a mix of confusion and brewing fear. He did not speak of his own failure or his solitary discoveries. He spoke of the mountain song, the discordant groan that threatened their entire world. Unfurling a large vellum scroll, he revealed the impossible geometries and reinforcing lattices from the hidden workshop, the ancient schematics glowing in the forge light. "This is not a legend," he declared, his voice cutting through the din. "This is a diagnosis, and this," he gestured to the complex drawings, "is the cure. We are the physicians, and our time is short." He then began to assign tasks with a commander's precision, his voice ringing with an authority born of desperate necessity. Master smiths were to forge a special alloy into thousands of resonant pins, each one a note in a new harmonic song. The masons were dispatched to the deepest quarries to cut foundation stones to exacting, radical specifications. Even the jewelers, often seen as creators of mere ornament, were given a vital role, tasked with polishing flawless crystal lenses that would focus energy onto the Ailing Heartstone. The initial fear in the hall did not vanish, but it was transformed, channeled into a single, coordinated effort. Individual pride was set aside as the entire Builders Guild became one living organism, each dwarf a specialized cell working toward a common salvation. Kalen watched the chaotic ballet of hammers and chisels, knowing that the tension of so many moving parts was a danger in itself. One misplaced measurement, one flawed pin, could unravel everything. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable to him just days before. He called his most trusted senior apprentices to him, delegating oversight of the major forges and stone yards. He was placing the fate of the mountain in the hands of the very generation whose values he had doubted. Then his eyes found a young apprentice named Lyra, huddled near a drafting table, her fingers stained with ink, but her hands trembling. She was known for her brilliant, intuitive understanding of resonance patterns, but also for a paralyzing shyness that kept her in the background. Kalen walked to her, his shadow falling over her intricate calculations. "Your maps of the deep sound currents are the most accurate I have seen," he said, his voice low. "I do not need another strong arm. I need your mind. Come with me." The fate of the Heartstone may depend on what you can hear that the rest of us cannot. The singing spire was a needle of living rock, piercing the mountain's inner darkness. Kalen and Lyra ascended its winding path, the air growing thin and charged with a latent energy that raised the hairs on their arms. At the summit, ancient tuning forks of solid bronze, each taller than 3 dwarves, stood embedded in the stone like a grove of metallic trees. These were not tools for music, but the mountain's foundational anchors, designed to channel the deep resonance of the world. Following the schematics from the lost workshop, their task was not one of brute force, but of impossible precision. They had to adjust the harmonic pitch of each colossal fork, using hammers weighted with exact amounts of lead and mithril. A single miscalculation, one strike with too much force, or in the wrong sequence, would not just fail. It would shatter the fork, sending a wave of destructive dissonance straight to the Ailing Heartstone and accelerating the collapse they were trying to prevent. The pressure was a physical weight, silencing even their thoughts. Kaelin watched Lyra's hands as she prepared the first hammer. They were no longer trembling. Her entire being seemed focused on the task, her ears attuned to frequencies he could only mathematically predict. He saw in her a mastery, not of craft, but of perception. In that moment, the old dwarf made a choice that felt like releasing a breath he had held for a century. He stepped back. The final sequence, the most delicate adjustments to the primary fork, are yours, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Your ear is truer than my diagrams. Lyra nodded, her eyes wide but steady. She lifted the heavy hammer as if it were a feather, her movements fluid and sure. One by one, she struck the forks in the intricate sequence, each impact producing a deep, bell-like tone that vibrated through the stone under their feet and up into the very bones of their bodies. The separate notes began to weave together, creating a complex, stabilizing chord that rolled down the spire and out through the surrounding rock. Far below, in the chamber of the Heartstone, the frantic, pained pulsing of the crystal began to slow. The black, vein-like cracks ceased their spread, held in check by the new harmonic field. They had bought the time the guild needed. As the last, perfect note from the final fork faded into a sustaining hum, Lyra lowered her hammer, her body trembling with spent effort. She pointed a shaking finger down into the vast gloom. There, like a trail of determined fireflies, the first team of builders was descending, their lanterns illuminating the path to the mountain's wounded heart. Ropes of woven steel sang against the sheer obsidian walls of the chamber as the team descended into the breath of the mountain itself. 24 master builders, each a specialist chosen by Kaelin, rappelled into the abyss, their figures dwarfed by the immense Ailing Heartstone. Its sickly amber glow pulsed around them, a dying heartbeat that illuminated their perilous work. They carried the fruits of the Grand Forge's labor, the first of the silver alloy braces, each one gleaming with a soft, captured light. This was no longer theory on a chalkboard or a model on a table. This was the direct application of a forgotten craft to a living, wounded entity. Every clink of a harness, every scrape of a boot against the rock, felt like a shout in a sacred space. The air hummed with volatile energy, a tangible pressure that threatened to turn their careful work into a catalyst for total collapse. Kaelin directed the operation from the most dangerous position, planting his own boots at the very base of the Heartstone, where the largest, deepest crack throbbed with a discordant rhythm. He would set the first brace himself. With painstaking care, he and 2 other masons began to fit the complex lattice of interlocking filaments around the crystal's base. The metal was cool to the touch, but as it neared the stone, it began to vibrate, seeking harmony with the mountain's core. The slightest misalignment, a vibration from a dropped tool, or a hammer strike a fraction too hard, could send a shockwave through the crystal and finish the work the decay had started. The safety of every dwarf on the ropes, the future of the entire mountain, hung on the precision of their hands and the steadiness of their nerves. After what felt like an age of held breaths, the first brace clicked into its final position. A deep, resonant thrum echoed through the chamber, a note of pure, stable power that was felt more than heard. The frantic, pained pulsing of the Heartstone softened, its light steadying for a glorious moment. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the team, but that single note of harmony was a stress the surrounding rock could no longer bear. With a deafening crack, a vast section of the chamber wall, long weakened by the chaotic resonances, suddenly sheared away and crashed down into the darkness below. In its place, a new gaping opening was revealed, from which the slow, cold rush of ancient, flooded tunnels poured into the sacred space. Icy water, black and shockingly cold, exploded from the breach. It poured into the chamber in a churning torrent, swallowing the lower ledges in moments and surging toward the base of the Heartstone. The delicate silver braces, just beginning to harmonize with the crystal, were now threatened not by resonance, but by a flood that could short-circuit their energy and wash away the builders themselves. Kaelin's shouted warning was swallowed by the roar of the water as he and a handful of others scrambled up the ropes, their boots slipping on the now slick rock. The repair mission had shattered into a desperate fight for survival. A subterranean aquifer, a hidden sea sleeping within the mountain for ages, had been awakened by the collapsing wall. The conflict was no longer a patient, precise application of craft. It was a brutal, immediate race against a rising tide. Their tools were not hammers and chisels now, but their own bodies and whatever they could find. Stone slabs, intended for foundational work, became the components of a frantic, makeshift dam. Dwarves strained together, muscles bulging, bracing the heavy rock against the relentless push of the water, their legs numb from the cold. Kaelin, his voice raw, bellowed upward toward the chamber's rim, his orders cutting through the chaos. He called for a team to find the old drainage channels, the ancient overflow routes, carved by the first builders for just such a calamity. They had to redirect the flow to give the chamber a chance. The stakes escalated from saving their home to simply staying alive, and the risk expanded with every inch the water rose. If the flood could not be contained, it would not only doom the Heartstone, it would seep into countless lower halls and forges, undermining the mountain's structural integrity for generations. As the dwarves heaved against the stone barrier, the icy water climbing past their waists, a new sound joined the cacophony. A series of sharp, coordinated hammer strikes echoed from somewhere far above, a rhythmic, purposeful percussion. Then, a deep grinding reverberated through the stone. The torrent, pushing against them, wavered, its force lessening as the flow from the breach began to ebb. The diversion team had succeeded. The immediate drowning was averted, but the chamber was now a half-flooded cavern, the work to save the mountain's heart more perilous than ever. The churning water receded, leaving behind a scene of cold, dripping chaos. From the dark mouth of the flooded tunnel, a new motion caught the light. Not a surge of water, but a ripple of smooth, gray forms gliding through the shallows. They were creatures shaped like otters, but carved from living stone, their bodies seamless and cool to the touch. They moved with a fluid grace, clicking and chittering in a soft, percussive language. The dwarves watched stunned, their hammers held slack. They were not the only children of the mountain. One of the larger stone otters, its pelt marbled with veins of quartz, swam directly to Kaelin. It nudged his tool belt with a cool, rounded nose, then turned its head back toward the breached tunnel, emitting a series of urgent clicks. The gesture was unmistakable, a plea for help. Kaelin felt a deep, unexpected shame. His drive to save his own people had unwittingly shattered the home of another. The engineering crisis was now also a moral one. His urgent mission to brace the Heartstone ward with this new, undeniable responsibility. A true builder did not just impose his will upon the stone, he listened to all its inhabitants. He made a swift decision. "Lyra," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Take 2 others and go with them. See what was damaged. See if we can make it right." As Lyra and her small team waded into the tunnel after the retreating forms of the stone otters, the stakes of their endeavor expanded. They were no longer just repairing a crystal. They were mending a relationship with the mountain's hidden life. Gaining the trust of these creatures might reveal secrets the stone itself had forgotten. The wait felt interminable, but Lyra returned far sooner than anyone expected, her clothes soaked, but her eyes alight with a fierce excitement. She held out her hands, which were coated in a strange, silvery gray clay that still held the shape of her fingers. "Master Builder," she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with discovery. "Their entire cavern is lined with it. It is soft as wet sand when you work it, but when the air touches it, it sets harder than granite." The stone otters chittered and nudged, leading Kalen and his masons through the flooded passage into their cavern. The walls were not raw rock, but a tapestry of smooth, silver-gray clay, seamlessly patched and reinforced over countless generations. One of the larger otters, its quartz-streaked form moving with purpose, scooped a pawful of the soft, pliable substance from a wall niche. With deliberate, graceful motions, it demonstrated how it would press the clay into a hairline fissure, smoothing it with its nose until the wall was whole again. This was not mere instinct, it was a practiced craft, a living mortar that healed the mountain from within. The dwarves watched, their professional pride humbled by the elegant simplicity of the solution. Kalen's mind raced, connecting ancient schematics to this new discovery. He took a small lump of the clay, and with a respectful glance toward the otters, he mixed in a pinch of powdered crystal from a shattered shard of the Heartstone he carried for study. The result was instantaneous. The gray clay began to pulse with a soft, internal light, and when he pressed it between 2 stones, it set within moments into a bond stronger than steel, humming with resonant energy. They had found the perfect conductive mortar, a material that could fuse with the Heartstone itself, but time was their enemy. The harmonic field from the singing spire was a temporary measure, a bandage on a wound that needed stitches. They could already feel its stabilizing cord beginning to waver, a faint tremble returning to the stone beneath their feet. The race was now to harvest enough clay before that protective field collapsed entirely and the Heartstone's decay accelerated beyond repair. Kalen immediately organized his team, not as miners, but as partners. They worked alongside the otters, taking only what was offered from specific, abundant wall seams, and in return, using their own stone shaping skills to help reinforce the otters' dens against the recent flooding. This was not a plundering, it was an alliance forged in mutual need. The success of the entire repair, the fate of every hall above, now hinged on this gifted, living material. With the first barrels of the luminous clay being carefully hauled back toward the Heartstone, Kalen paused, his hand flat on the tunnel wall. A deep, dissonant groan shivered up through the rock, a clear and ominous sign that the mountain's borrowed time was running out. Back in the cavern of the Heartstone, a fragile quiet had settled over the frantic work. The floodwaters were mostly gone, leaving behind damp, glistening walls and a floor littered with the tools of salvation. The great crystal itself was now encased in a gleaming silver lattice, a metallic embrace holding its fractured form together. Teams of builders moved with the slow, deliberate care of surgeons, their hands carefully applying the luminous gray mortar to the web of black cracks that marred the stone's surface. Each application was a whisper, a delicate sealing of a wound, and the process demanded an absolute stillness. The slightest tremor, a single dropped tool, could disrupt the Heartstone's volatile energy and undo all their labor. The painful, discordant vibrations emanating from the crystal were a constant, grinding pressure, a physical ache in their bones that tested their endurance with every passing moment. Every dwarf present, from the youngest apprentice to the most grizzled master smith, felt the weight of this culmination. All the separate efforts of the guild, the forging and the quarrying and the tuning, were now focused into this one, silent, painstaking action. Kalen moved among them, his own weariness a heavy cloak, his eyes missing no detail. He saw the trembling hands and set jaws, the shared understanding that their entire world was balanced on the edge of a chisel. Then he walked to the central mixing trough, where the last of the living clay pulsed with soft light. He emptied a small leather pouch into his palm, revealing a tiny, glittering shard of polished granite. It was a piece of his failed arch of echoes. Without a word, he ground the fragment to dust between his thumb and forefinger and let it fall into the mortar, stirring it slowly. It was not an act of pride, but of redemption. It was a promise that even broken things could be made whole again, that a flawed legacy could find its purpose in a greater repair. As the final handful of the glowing mixture was pressed into the last, deepest crack, the chamber fell into a breathless hush. Every eye was fixed on the Heartstone, waiting for a sign in the profound silence. The silence stretched into an eternity, thick and heavy with the scent of damp stone and cold fear. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. The black veins crawling across the Heartstone seemed to darken, drinking the light from the chamber. Then a dissonant groan, deeper and more pain than any before, shuddered up from the crystal's core. It was a sound of final protest, of a heart giving out. Several dwarves flinched, their hands flying to their ears to block the agonizing vibration that threatened to crack their own resolve. Hope, so carefully built, began to fracture in the unbearable quiet that followed. All eyes turned to Kalen. He stood firm, his boots rooted to the stone, his weathered hand still pressed flat against the crystal's cold surface. His eyes were closed, his entire being focused inward, listening not with his ears, but with his soul to the mountain's fading song. Inside, a storm of doubt raged. Had his faith in those ancient schematics been the pride of a foolish old dwarf? Had he led his entire people, every smith and mason who had trusted him, to their final resting place deep beneath the earth? This was the ultimate test, a battle not of tools but of spirit, fought in the crushing weight of potential failure. To order a retreat now would be to admit total defeat, to accept the collapse of everything they had ever built. Yet to hold fast required a trust that defied all present evidence. His decision was made in that silent, internal war. He would not give the signal. He would not move. He would trust the craft, the team, and the alliance they had forged. He would trust that the work of their hands, guided by a forgotten wisdom, had been true. The consequence of being wrong was unthinkable, a catastrophic end to a civilization. Then, from the very core of the stone, as if from a great distance, came a single, pure, clear note. It was the sound of a perfect crystal bell being struck, a tone so clean and resonant it seemed to wash the very air of its pain. That single, perfect note multiplied, flowing up through the network of luminous mortar and silver braces like a rising tide of light. The black, painful veins crawling across the Heartstone transformed, each one becoming a conduit for a soft, golden radiance that pulsed in time with a deep, steadying rhythm. The agonizing groan that had threatened to shatter their world dissolved, replaced by a foundational chord of profound harmony that vibrated up through the stone beneath their feet and into the very bones of the dwarves who stood witness. This was not just a repair, it was a rebirth. The mountain's resonant energy, once sick and fading, now flowed stronger and more stable than ever, enhanced by the elegant fusion of ancient dwarven science and the living gift of the stone otters. The central, physical conflict that had driven them to the brink was over, resolved in a wave of overwhelming relief that left many of the hardened builders openly weeping, their tools falling from trembling hands as they looked upon the healed heart of their home. In the midst of this collective triumph, Kalen turned from the gloriously pulsing crystal. His eyes found Lyra, who stood with her own hands still covered in the silvery clay, her face awash with the golden light. He walked to her and placed a firm, steadying hand on her shoulder, a public and profound gesture of acknowledgement. "Your ear saved us all," he said, his voice thick with an emotion far deeper than pride. "The future of our craft is safe because of what you hear in the silence." This was more than praise. It was a passing of the torch, a resolution of the personal stakes that had haunted Kalen since the first crack appeared in his arch. The immediate, terrifying danger was gone, but in its place arose the quiet, urgent question of what they would build with this second chance. As the harmonious chord swelled to fill the cavern, a new sound reached them, not from the stone before them, but through it. Faint at first, then growing into an unmistakable roar, came the distant, joyous cheers of the dwarves in the halls far above, their celebrations echoing down through the living rock as they felt their mountain become whole once more. The roar of celebration was a physical force in the grand hall, a wave of joyous sound that washed over Kalen and his weary team as they emerged from the deep passages. The very air seemed to vibrate with it. Everywhere he looked, dwarves were laughing, embracing, and stomping their heavy boots in a thunderous rhythm that perfectly matched the mountain's new, steady heartbeat resonating up through the floor. The grim silence of crisis had been utterly banished, replaced by a collective release of fear that had been held for far too long. Through the cheering crowd, the Elder Council moved with a new, deliberate grace. Elder Boren stepped forward, and instead of the stern judgment Kalen had expected, he saw only profound respect in the old dwarf's eyes. Boren placed a hand on Kalen's shoulder, his grip firm. "You have returned the song to our home, Master Builder. The clan owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid." The unity in the hall was palpable, a single clan bound by a shared ordeal and a shared salvation. The Builders' Guild was no longer seen as mere artisans of walls and vaults, but as the true guardians of the mountain's living heart. Kalen, however, felt a deep and instinctive humility. When the crowd's cheers began to solidify into chants of his name, he raised his hands for silence, his voice cutting through the din. "The credit is not mine alone," he declared, his gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. "It belongs to the sharp ears of our apprentices, like Lyra, who heard the truth when others did not. It belongs to the silent guardians of the deep, the stone otters, who shared their ancient craft. It belongs to every smith who forged a pin, every mason who cut a stone, and every dwarf who trusted in a plan they could not fully see. We did not save the mountain. We remembered how to listen to it, and we worked together as one people to help it heal itself. By redirecting the praise, Kalen was not just being modest. He was actively defining the new normal, ensuring the lessons of trust, alliance, and collective purpose would be woven into the fabric of their society. The highest stakes now were not of survival, but of memory. Would they forget this hard-won wisdom when the immediate danger faded? As the celebration swirled around him, full of song and the clinking of ale horns, Kalen's eyes drifted away from the crowd. They found the shadowed entrance to the corridor that led back to his life's first great work, the Flawed Arch of Echoes. His mind, no longer burdened by the threat of collapse, was already turning. The arch was a monument to an old idea of beauty. Now, he understood that true beauty was not in perfect, solitary creation, but in harmonious, living repair. He felt the pull of a new project, one that would not stand alone, but would connect, a bridge built with a new understanding, forged in the heart of the mountain. The morning after the great celebration, the echoes of song were replaced by the quiet purpose of footsteps. Kalen did not walk the familiar path to his Arch of Echoes. He led a procession of master builders and senior apprentices down into the deep, reclaimed tunnels, to the threshold of the hidden workshop. He pushed open the stone door, and the assembled dwarves stepped into the silent, clockwork sanctuary, their eyes wide with awe. "This place is no longer a secret," Kalen announced, his voice firm. "It is our new foundation. From this day forward, the principles discovered here will be the heart of our craft." The air, once stale with age, now filled with the energy of intense focus. As Kalen stood before the intricate models, he did not simply show them the designs, he taught them the why. He explained how the impossible angles distributed pressure, not just through stone, but through the mountain's own resonant field. He described the living mortar not as a substance, but as a partner, a material that listened to the stone and strengthened its own natural song. The initial confusion on the faces of the veteran masons gave way to dawning understanding, a positive, energetic tension filling the room as they grappled with concepts that rewrote everything they thought they knew. This was not a lecture, it was the birth of a new philosophy. Dwarven engineering was evolving, shedding its solitary focus on impenetrable strength and embracing a dynamic, symbiotic relationship with the entire mountain ecosystem. Their responsibility was no longer just to their own halls, but to the silent, living network of stone, water, and hidden life that sustained them. In the midst of this intellectual ferment, Kalen turned to Lyra, who was quietly translating a complex schematic for a group of wide-eyed apprentices. He raised his voice so all could hear. "The preservation of this knowledge is as vital as its discovery. Lyra, from this moment, you are the chief archivist of this workshop. Your duty is to guard these truths, to add to them, and to ensure they are never again lost to time." It was a profound passing of trust, securing the future of their craft, not in a single master, but in a living, growing library of understanding. The long-term stakes were now the cultural and technological future of their civilization, a promise to build a world that that would endure for millennia, not just centuries. Looking out at the faces of his guild, masters and novices, working side by side to decipher the wisdom of their ancestors, Kalen felt a new idea take root, one born directly from their recent, harrowing triumph. "We have learned to heal the mountain's heart," he said, his voice gaining a resonant power. "Now, let us build something that celebrates that connection. I propose we construct a new hall, not of solitary grandeur, but of community, a great bridge of resonance, uniting the old halls with the deep places, a structure that sings with the very life we helped to save." The design did not arrive on a single scroll, but unfolded across a dozen drafting tables, pushed together in the center of the reclaimed workshop. Kalen stood at the head of this makeshift council, his hands moving over the vellum to trace a vision that was both radical and deeply traditional. He proposed not a solitary arch, but a great circular forum to be built around the base of the singing spire itself. Its vaulting stone ribs would not block the spire's resonance, but would be carefully angled to catch the mountain's harmonious song and amplify it, weaving the sound throughout the surrounding halls like a constant, gentle reminder of their connection to the deep heart of the world. He called it the Arch of Unity, a structure whose very purpose was to turn a moment of salvation into a permanent way of life. Its construction would be a communal effort from the very first stone, requiring the synchronized labor of every guild, from the lowliest quarry apprentice to the most masterful gem cutter. His personal legacy project, the Flawed Arch of Echoes, was not discarded but transformed, its original intent for peaceful beauty now reimagined on a grand, inclusive scale. This new forum would be a physical manifestation of the hard-won lesson that true strength lies not in solitary perfection, but in interconnected harmony. The challenge they now faced was one of ambitious creation, not desperate survival. The tension in the air was no longer fueled by fear, but by the thrilling complexity of managing a massive public works project that was as much about artistic collaboration as it was about engineering. Disagreements arose, but they were the productive debates of masters working toward a shared goal. A master mason might propose a curve for its aesthetic flow, only for a resonance theorist like Lyra to suggest a slight adjustment that would better channel the sound waves. Kalen, in a decision that defined his new role, did not simply issue a decree. He listened to both and guided them toward a synthesis that served both beauty and function. He had chosen to be the lead designer and mentor, his primary goal to empower the next generation to make key artistic and structural decisions. He saw his responsibility not as the sole author of this new chapter, but as the curator of the collective genius surrounding him. The stakes for this endeavor were profound, yet entirely different from those of the crisis. This was about cementing a cultural shift into the very bedrock of their civilization. The Arch of Unity was intended to be a lasting monument to peace and cooperation, a testament etched in stone and resonance to what the dwarves could achieve when every hand and every mind worked as one. Its success would ensure that the memory of their near collapse did not fade into a mere legend, but remained a living, breathing principle that guided their craft for generations to come. It was a promise to their future selves and to the silent stone otters in the deep that they would be stewards, not just occupants, of the mountain. With the final designs approved, The forges and quarries hummed with a renewed, focused purpose. On a morning clear and bright with the mountain's steady song, the entire clan gathered at the site. The first foundation stones for the Arch of Unity were laid not by Kaelin alone, but by a line of dwarves, young and old, each placing a hand upon the rock as it was set, their voices joining in a single, resonant chant that sealed their collective promise into the stone. A soft, rhythmic clicking echoed from the entrance tunnel, a sound that stilled the chanting dwarves. The family of stone otters flowed into the chamber, their smooth, gray forms moving with a quiet purpose that commanded respect. They moved as a single entity, parting the crowd without a sound, led by the quartz-streaked elder who had first sought Kaelin's help. The great otter stopped before him, its obsidian eyes holding his gaze. In its mouth, it carried a geode, perfectly spherical and unassuming in its rough, rocky exterior. With a slow, deliberate motion, it placed the stone at Kaelin's feet. A moment of profound silence held the hall, and then the geode began to pulse with a soft, internal light, a gentle rhythm that beat in perfect time with the deep, steady thrum of the distant Heartstone. This was not a tool or a resource. It was a living symbol, a piece of the mountain's very soul offered in trust. The last vestiges of an old mindset, the idea that the dwarves stood apart from the mountain they inhabited, dissolved in that shared, silent understanding. Kaelin knelt, his calloused hands gently cradling the gift. He accepted it not for himself, but for every dwarf present and those yet to come. He turned to his master jewelers, their faces alight with awe. "This will be the heart of our new forum," he instructed. "Craft a setting that honors both our hands and their forms. Let the metal flow like water around stone, a permanent reminder of our alliance." The stakes of their endeavor expanded in that moment, becoming as deep and interconnected as the mountain's own roots. The biological health of the otters, the geological stability of the Heartstone, and the cultural vitality of the Dwarven halls were now inextricably woven into a single, vibrant tapestry. To nurture one was to care for all. As the jewelers carefully lifted the geode to carry it to its new workshop, it emitted a single, soft chime, a note of such pure clarity that it seemed to hang in the air. Lyra, who had been listening with her eyes closed, smiled. "The mountain's foundational song remains," she said softly, "but now it has a new counter melody. One of pure joy. The final keystone of the central dome hovered in the air, suspended by a complex web of ropes and pulleys. A team of 4 young apprentices, their faces tight with concentration, guided the stone's descent with painstaking care. Kaelin stood nearby, his arms crossed, his own breath held. He offered no instruction, no final correction. This was their moment, their test. The intricately carved block of white granite settled into its waiting space with a soft, definitive click that echoed in the hushed forum. For a single, heart-stopping second, there was only silence. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the stone itself, a vibration that traveled up the vaulting ribs of the dome. It caught the foundational song from the singing spire and the steady, life-giving pulse from the Heartstone deep below, weaving the 2 separate melodies into a single, breathtaking symphony. The air itself seemed to shimmer, filled with a harmony so complex and beautiful, it felt like the mountain was breathing a sigh of profound relief. The Arch of Unity was not just complete, it was alive. It was an immediate and stunning success. a structure that surpassed the grandest halls of old, not through solitary strength, but through its genius for connection. The anticipatory tension shattered into a wave of pure, shared awe. Kalen turned from the resonating dome, his eyes finding Lyra in the crowd. He walked to her, the eyes of every dwarf in the forum upon them. In the heart of the beautiful music his people had just created together, he knew his own work was done. He slowly pulled the heavy, rune-inscribed ring of the master builder from his finger. He took Lyra's hand and placed the ring firmly in her palm, closing her fingers over it. The gesture was silent, but its meaning echoed louder than any song. He was not just honoring her, he was entrusting her with the future, proving that collaboration and adaptation could achieve heights solitary perfectionism never could. As the resonant symphony swelled, dwarves from every corner of the mountain, from the highest forges to the deepest mines, were drawn into the forum. They did not gather in panic or fear, but in peace and quiet wonder, their faces upturned to the dome as the music of their healed home washed over them. The deep, resonant symphony of the Arch of Unity had become the new sound of Kalen's days. He no longer sought the solitude of a private workshop, but instead spent his hours on a simple stone bench within the great forum. From there, he could watch Lyra and the other new masters guide a fresh generation of apprentices through the intricate principles of resonant engineering. His role had shifted from the solitary architect to the quiet observer, a living library of hard-won wisdom who answered questions not with commands, but with gentle, guiding questions of his own. In nurturing the minds of others, he discovered a fulfillment far deeper than any pride he had ever taken in a solitary creation. The positive challenge of education, the passing of a torch, was the only tension that remained, and it was a joyful one. This new purpose crystallized into a decision. He began to write, not on fleeting parchment, but on durable slate tablets. He was compiling a comprehensive codex, a masterwork that would unite the ancient schematics from the hidden workshop, the first-hand account of the Heartstone's repair, and the core philosophy of building in harmony with the mountain's living systems. The stakes for this quiet work were as profound as any he had faced, for this codex would be the enduring vessel of their collective memory, a guide to ensure the peace and stability of the halls for countless generations to come. One evening, as he carefully etched a new chapter, detailing the silent language and generous craft of the stone Otters, he felt a familiar, gentle nudge at his side. A new presence graced the forum, one that caused no alarm, but only deepened the sense of peace. The brass and granite automaton, the silent warden from the hidden workshop, now sat motionless near the central geode. Its obsidian eyes, which had once burned with a warning amber, now glowed with a soft, steady blue light. It did not guard a secret any longer, but seemed to be monitoring the very air, a mechanical steward, listening to the health of the mountain's resonance. Its integration into daily life was seamless, a quiet sign that the old, hidden knowledge was no longer locked away, but had become a living, active part of their world. There was no conflict in its arrival, only a profound sense of rightness, as if a long-lost sentinel had finally come home. Kalen observed the creature for a long while before addressing the curious dwarves who had gathered at a respectful distance. He explained that this was not an intruder, but a living monument to their ancestors' wisdom. "We will accept it as a permanent resident of this hall," he declared. "Its vigil honors the past and protects our future." This decision symbolized a full reconciliation with their history, a confident step into an era built on a foundation of integrated knowledge. As the Automaton settled into its eternal watch, the forum began to fill with dwarves of all ages. They did not come for ceremony or work, but to simply be. Families would sit on the smooth stone benches, sharing a meal while listening to the mountain symphony. Young apprentices, their lessons done, would lie on their backs and watch the play of light across the dome, their minds quiet. The space had become more than an architectural marvel. It was the communal heart of the mountain, a place where every dwarf could feel their connection to the deep, steady song of their home. The frantic rhythm of the pickaxe had been replaced by the steady, purposeful hum of tuning forks. The dwarven halls were no longer a network of mines, but a single, living instrument, carefully maintained and played. This resonant harmony, born from crisis, now nurtured every facet of life within the mountain. In the fungal gardens, the air itself seemed to encourage growth, with mushrooms swelling to unprecedented sizes and glowing with a healthy, vibrant light. The gem cutters found a new clarity in their work, the stones seeming to sing as their facets were shaped, revealing inner fires that had previously lain dormant. A general sense of well-being settled over the clans, a deep-seated calm that smoothed frayed nerves and turned daily chores into acts of shared purpose. The mountain had become a true home, a sanctuary of relaxation and creation that fulfilled Kalen's original vision for his craft on a scale he had never dared to dream. This state of equilibrium was the positive outcome of all their past struggles, a testament to the power of their collective decisions. The clan, as one, had adopted a new guiding principle, a motto etched above every major forge and gateway. "We build with the stone, not upon it." This simple phrase now guided all future endeavors, ensuring that every new construction would be a conversation with the mountain, not a command. The enduring stake for this civilization was no longer mere survival, but the active, gentle preservation of this hard-won harmony. It was a quiet, constant purpose that gave meaning to every chisel stroke and every tuned resonance. In this pervasive atmosphere of peace, Kalen felt a quiet, persistent pull toward one last, personal task. There was a final piece of his own story that needed to be put to rest, a journey he knew he had to make alone. The quiet corridor leading to his old workshop felt different underfoot. Kalen walked the familiar path, not as a master returning to a throne, but as a visitor to a memory. He pushed the heavy door open, and there it stood, bathed in a single shaft of light from a high crevice. The arch of echoes, the hairline fracture still traced a delicate, silver path across its surface, a permanent record of the day his world had broken. For a long moment, he simply stood before it, not with the old sting of shame, but with a quiet sense of recognition. The flaw was not a personal failure, but the mountain's first, desperate whisper for help, a symptom he had been too proud to hear. He approached the arch, his footsteps silent on the dusty floor. From his tool belt, he did not draw a heavy hammer for demolition, but a small, precise tuning chisel and a light mallet. He placed his free hand flat against the cold stone, feeling the deep, steady thrum of the Heartstone's health and the brighter, complex melody of the distant forum. His goal was no longer to make this arch a perfect soloist. His purpose was to help it find its voice in the choir. With a series of gentle, calculated taps, he made minute adjustments to the arch's inner supports, not to erase its imperfection, but to tune its resonance. He shifted the angle of a keystone by a fraction of a degree and smoothed an internal channel that had been blocking the flow of sound. He worked with the fracture, not against it, allowing the flaw to become a unique filter that added a subtle, bittersweet counter melody to the mountain's grand song. When he struck the arch one final, light tap, it answered not with the dead silence of before, nor the shattering cry of its breaking, but with a soft, low hum. It was a supporting note, a foundational bass that wove itself seamlessly into the symphony, flowing from the forum and the deep places. The arch was finally singing, not alone, but as part of the great chorus it had always been meant to join. He made the deliberate choice to leave the visible crack untouched. It was a testament, a reminder that true strength is not the absence of breaks, but the integrity with which they are mended. Beauty was not flawless stone, but the harmony that could emerge from acknowledged imperfection. This quiet act in the empty workshop was the final resolution of his lifelong ambition. The seeker of a solitary legacy had become a guardian of a piece that belonged to everyone. Satisfied, Kalen sat on a rough-hewn bench in the shadow of the now singing arch, closing his eyes to listen. The deep, steady pulse from below, intertwined with the vibrant symphony from the forum, and woven through them both was the soft, humble hum of his first great work, finally home. The soft glow of the forum's central geode painted everything in hues of blue and gold as the day's work ended. This was Kalen's favorite hour, when the great hall filled not with the clamor of construction, but with the quiet murmur of shared presence. He would often find his usual bench already occupied by Lyra and a handful of other master builders, their tools set aside, their faces relaxed. There were no grand plans to debate, no structural crises to solve. Instead, they spoke of subtle resonances noticed in the lower forges, or shared old tales of the mountain with wide-eyed apprentices who sat cross-legged on the smooth stone floor. Sometimes they said nothing at all, simply sitting together in a comfortable silence that was filled by the enduring, harmonious song of the mountain they had saved. His own tools, once wielded in solitary focus on a single, perfect arch, were now kept close for different purposes. He might use a small tuning hammer to demonstrate a principle of acoustic reflection to a curious novice, or his sharpest chisel to help a jeweler carefully adjust the setting around a singing crystal. These were small, joyful acts of maintenance and teaching, each one a quiet affirmation of the interconnected world they had built. The relentless drive for a solitary legacy had been replaced by a profound, lasting contentment. He had consciously chosen this life of gentle influence, discovering that nurturing the next generation and contributing to the community's daily peace was far more rewarding than any legendary status he had once pursued. His personal happiness, once tied to the flawless completion of a single monument, was now as secure and steady as the mountain's own heartbeat. As the soft light of the glowing fungi embedded in the vaulted ceiling began to gently dim for the night, signaling the end of another peaceful day, Kalen leaned back against the warm stone. He listened to the low hum of the forum and the distant, cheerful echoes of dwarves returning to their hearths. He smiled, a deep and quiet satisfaction settling in his bones, knowing the halls were safe and his true work was finally done. That single, perfect note multiplied, flowing up through the network of luminous mortar and silver braces like a rising tide of light. The black, painful veins crawling across the Heartstone transformed, each one becoming a conduit for a soft, golden radiance that pulsed in time with a deep, steadying rhythm. The agonizing groan that had threatened to shatter their world dissolved, replaced by a foundational chord of profound harmony that vibrated up through the stone beneath their feet and into the very bones of the dwarves who stood witness. This was not just a repair, it was a rebirth. The mountain's resonant energy, once sick and fading, now flowed stronger and more stable than ever, enhanced by the elegant fusion of ancient dwarven science and the living gift of the stone otters. The central, physical conflict that had driven them to the brink was over, resolved in a wave of overwhelming relief that left many of the hardened builders openly weeping, their tools falling from trembling hands as they looked upon the healed heart of their home. In the midst of this collective triumph, Kalen turned from the gloriously pulsing crystal. His eyes found Lyra, who stood with her own hands still covered in the silvery clay, her face awash with the golden light. He walked to her and placed a firm, steadying hand on her shoulder, a public and profound gesture of acknowledgement. "Your ear saved us all," he said, his voice thick with an emotion far deeper than pride. "The future of our craft is safe because of what you hear in the silence." This was more than praise. It was a passing of the torch, a resolution of the personal stakes that had haunted Kalen since the first crack appeared in his arch. The immediate, terrifying danger was gone, but in its place arose the quiet, urgent question of what they would build with this second chance. As the harmonious chord swelled to fill the cavern, a new sound reached them, not from the stone before them, but through it. Faint at first, then growing into an unmistakable roar, came the distant, joyous cheers of the dwarves in the halls far above, their celebrations echoing down through the living rock as they felt their mountain become whole once more. The deep, resonant peace of the dwarven halls is a living thing now, a quiet hum felt in the bones of every dwarf and etched into the very stone. It is a peace built not from flawless construction, but from the wisdom of a fracture. The great crisis taught them that true strength is not found in solitary mastery, but in the collective act of listening to the mountain's subtle songs and to the quiet voices of the next generation. Kalen's personal journey mirrors this profound shift. Once a master builder obsessed with his own legacy, he now finds his greatest purpose in the gentle rhythm of mentorship. He understands that his most important creation was not an arch, but a new way of thinking, a philosophy passed on to builders like Lyra, who now guide the craft with a deeper, more intuitive ear. The halls themselves have transformed from a network of fortresses into a single, harmonious sanctuary. The frantic ambition to conquer the mountain has been replaced by a calm, joyful stewardship. The forges still roar and the chisels still sing, but their work is no longer a frantic race for more. It is a careful, deliberate contribution to a world in balance. The Arch of Unity stands as the heart of this new era, its symphonic resonance, a constant reminder of the connection between every hall, every dwarf, and the living mountain that sustains them. The builders beneath the mountain have learned their most vital lesson. They are not just occupants of the deep places, but they're eternal guardians, entrusted with a simple, profound duty to nurture the deep, resonant peace they help to create, ensuring it endures for all the ages to come.